for Labour and the Working Poor at Georgetown University. I spoke to her a little earlier to get her analysis. Elaine Windham, thanks for joining us. Let's start by looking at the UAW strike that's just been called. It's the first time the union has hit all three of the big three car manufacturers with a strike at the same time. Why is this strike action so different and so serious?
So yes, this is a historic action. Like you said, it's the first time in the 80-plus year history of the UAW that they have struck all the big three automakers. Of course, 13,000 workers are now on strike. But if all 150,000 workers went out on strike, then the two strikes happening in the US right now at the UAW and at SAG-AFTRA with the actors and writers, that would make it the two largest strikes in the last 20 years happening simultaneously in the US. We're just not used to this level of worker action and collective activity in labor. So it feels very different here.
And why do you think that is happening now? And obviously you could add into that the rail strike that almost happened at the end of last year as well. Why is there this sudden level of extra agitation then, as you say, you'd be used to seeing here?
Yeah, and a lot of people, of course, have been calling it hot labor summer. In part, it's because unemployment is low, right? But it's really more than that. This is part of what you might call a post-pandemic worker upsurge. There is just lots more worker activism in the last few years. I think that during the pandemic, people reevaluated what they are willing to take from a job, what they're willing to expect. People banged pots and pans for essential workers and then watched as people went back to those same old jobs. And people, I think, have a different mindset about the workplace in the post-pandemic era. They're demanding more. And of course, when some workers go out on strike, like at the UAW, it can turbocharge sort of the whole movement. There's a lot of momentum happening with so many workers striking and organizing. And so I think we're seeing that in many sectors across the economy.
And so if unions are taking a harder line, can we expect to see employers doing something similar? I mean, when you look at the Hollywood Screen Actors and Writers strike, that's going on for quite some months now. We don't know what's going to happen with the UAW strike, how long that will last for. But is there a hardening of both positions?
Well, I think that employers in the United States are not used to workers pushing back at the level that they are now. And I think that they are beginning to recalibrate how they are going to work with their employees who are engaging in collective action. We recently saw that nearly 200,000 UPS workers almost went on strike, who are members of the Teamsters. That strike didn't happen, in part because it looks like UPS realized, okay, there's lots of activity. These workers are ready to walk, and so the Teamsters were able to deal with the two-tier wage system that is the same sort of thing that the UAW is trying to deal with. And so yes, I think that some employers may decide, we have to rethink what we are asking of our employees, and we may have to come in at a different level in terms of our negotiations.
And is there a place for federal intervention in any of this? I mean, particularly the strike, the UAW strike, if it goes on for a long time and results in all nearly 150,000 workers out, there's a potential for a massive economic impact, not just in the region, but for the whole of the US.
So under the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947, President Biden has the authority to call for an 80-day cooling off period. That is different than what he did under the railroad worker strike. That was a different law. That's the Railroad Labor Act. And that allows the presidential administration a heavier hand in stepping into a labor dispute. the administration would have the capacity to call for a cooling off period. I'm not sure that President Biden will do that, however.
So it's an interesting one for him, though, isn't it, given how he kind of prides himself on coming from that working class background and speaking for workers and fairness.
Yeah, absolutely. The Biden administration has prided itself on being very pro-union and supporting working people. You know, just over Labor Day, the administration came out with a new study from the U.S. Treasury Department affirming the union advantage that union workers make 10 to 15% more than workers who don't have a union, and also narrow racial and gender wage gaps. You know, so the Biden administration has definitely been supporting workers' rights to organize, their rights to collective action.
The other issue, Lane, then as well, with the situation at the automakers and with UAW is environmental policies and how they impact upon long-standing industries. We hear a lot of talk about the need for a just transition. How can that be delivered in practice here for these workers, where their industry is changing so much in terms of moving to green technologies and away from fuels to more sustainable energy models?
Right. So technology, the question of technology is not so much, you know, can workers sort of stop technology, as much as who's going to have power over it. And this is sort of the same question that we see in the writers and actors strike in terms of the use of artificial intelligence. Auto workers are saying is we understand that there is going to be a transition to electric vehicles. We want to have a say, some power in that in that transition, and in part that's why they are really holding the line and making demands now and walking the picket line, because they understand that there's a massive transformation happening in the industry. They want to make sure that their rights, their standard of living is protected during that transition.
Okay, well, plenty more to talk about on this, but we'll leave it there for the moment. Lane Windham, labour historian at Georgetown University, thanks so much for joining us.
Terrific. Thank you.